Welcome to Spilling the TSA. Today we're talking about the Epstein files, but not in the way that social media actually wants you to. So, yes, there are third party mentions of South Africans in the Epstein files. For instance, former President Jacob Zuma, business figure Johan Rupert, and Patrice Motsepe. So, not direct contact, third party mentions. For instance, in former President Jacob Zuma's case, there was reference made to arrangements for a dinner in London. However, it has also come out that during that time period, Jeffrey Epstein was actually under house arrest. So there's no evidence that it actually took place, but we don't know what happened there. Then there is direct contact with South Africans. And yeah, we are not talking about the victims or the Alexander couple that ran properties for Jeffrey Epstein. We are talking about, for instance, Rob Hersoff, who has indicated his own admission that there was an event where he met Jeffrey Epstein. And then, of course, Elon Musk. I'm not sure if we still think of Elon Musk as a South African, but he has been mentioned several times. He had contact directly with Jeffrey Epstein and was requesting invitations to parties on the island. However, he is denying that. Okay. We must be clear from the start. Being named in the Epstein files is not a crime. It's not a conviction. It's not guilt by association. What it does show us is something much more sinister and uncomfortable. And that is that after Jeffrey Epstein was already convicted as a sex offender and a registered sex offender regarding an offense that was related to a 13-year-old child, his business networks and access to power continued. Meetings continued, deals continued, respectability remained. And while the public is currently obsessing about who appears, where, and why, the people who matter most, the victims, are pushed out of the frame. Their voices are irrelevant because the real issue isn't the lists or the gotcha moments for me. I must say that. The real issue is a system that repeatedly allows powerful, deviant men to exploit women and children. And then when it comes to consequences for that exploitation and that abuse, well, they soften. That entire system then softens. And this is where we stop pretending this is an American problem. These crimes don't only happen on private islands or in billionaire compounds in the United States. They happen in ordinary suburbs, in houses in Belleville, Cape Town, behind closed doors, hidden behind respectability. One of the examples in South Africa, for instance, is the case of Johannes Adolf Kleinhans. Kleinhans was a well-off connected businessman, a director of several companies and a CEO of a company in the tourist industry. He was arrested in November 2010 and convicted in 2012 on 95 counts involving sexual offenses against three minor girls. The girls' ages were 13 to 15. The charges included sexual assault, indecent assault, sexual grooming, compelled sexual assault, and the production and possession of child sexual abuse material. This was not opportunistic abuse, it was planned. Kleinhans bought a separate house in Belleville, distinct from the home he shared with his wife, and converted it into a private gym. Now, that house became a controlled environment to isolate girls, normalize physical access, and exploit them in that house. And this speaks to intent, not impulse. The victims were not chosen at random either. They came from impoverished white families, families with limited resources and limited power to challenge a man with money and social standing. Now, Kleinhans exploited that imbalance deliberately. During sentencing, for instance, the state told the court that Kleinhans attempted to blame his victims for his predicament. Rather than accept responsibility, he positioned himself as the one who was being wronged in this particular situation. The prosecution said Kleinhans tried to give the court the impression that he was a good and kindly old man, a benefactor, by showering his victims and their impoverished families with gifts and financial assistance. He paid for school fees and he provided money and support. And this was not generosity, it was grooming. The manipulation didn't stop there. As one of the victims grew older, he even bought her a car, reinforcing that long term dependence. And it attempted to recast exploitation and abuse as kindness. Now, then came the victim impact statements. And you can't find the entire statements, but what I read is that the younger victim had tried to take her life more than once. She was also self harming. There was also another victim whose mother testified, who said her schoolwork deteriorated, and also she was struggling with anger and emotional distress. Now, this is the damage that never expires. This is the harm that never gets appealed away. So in January 2013, Kleinhans was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. But he appealed, and that sentence was set aside and restructured. And what happened is, after the grouping of the counts, suspending portions, and ordering concurrency, the effective prison time for 95 counts against minors was reduced to 4 years. So now we step back. In the United States, Jeffrey Epstein exploited girls from vulnerable backgrounds, negotiated lenient outcomes, and remained embedded in elite networks long after his conviction. People were aware. It was no secret that Jeffrey Epstein was a registered sex offender in a charge related to a 13-year-old child. In South Africa, Johannes Kleinhans targeted girls from impoverished families. He used money as leverage. He created dedicated spaces to abuse and exploit them. He blamed his victims and ultimately saw his sentence substantially reduced. Different countries, different courts, same pattern. So no, the real question for me is not who is named in Epstein's files for a possible meeting. The real question is why systems keep negotiating with these degenerate men who have power, while children from poor families pay the permanent price. If we are serious about protecting women and children, outrage is not enough. Policies have to move. Sentencing reform for sexual offenses against minors. No more collapses on appeal that turn serious harm into symbolic punishment. I mean, 4 years for 95 sexual offenses against minors. Limits on sentence suspensions and concurrency in child sex cases. Dozens of counts should not be diluted into like fractions of accountability. Victim impact must be central and not supplementary. And that is something that doesn't get a lot of attention. I, for instance, read through one of the South African victims of Epstein. I actually read a deposition. It's over 300 pages. And it's not something that will get a lot of attention. It's just it's not exciting enough. It's painful and it's something that we don't want to pay attention to. We'd rather say, oh, look who's in the files. Also, there needs to be stricter scrutiny when it comes to rehabilitation claims. Treatment cannot substitute for accountability where there's grooming, there's planning, there's repetition, and that is being proven. Then treatment for me is, I'm a little bit skeptical on this, specifically when it comes to offenses, sexual offenses against children, because the rehabilitation in that particular area is I haven't really heard of many successful cases. And there needs to be mandatory transparency in plea deals and appeal outcomes. Quiet restructuring re-traumatizes victims and it erodes public trust. So until those things change, the message remains clear. Power gets mercy, victims get consequences. For me, this is not about scandal. We've seen these scandals over and over again. It's about the system that keeps failing the same people in the same way. And then we all act surprised when it happens again.
Spilling the tea, essay, light on the way. Spilling the tea, essay, truth won't fade away.
Thank you for joining me on Spilling the TSA. And if you care about justice, center the victims, not the spectacle.